We waiting support from that.
Brandon and Julia seemed like they were doomed from the start, but now it's been years since they've been on 90 Day Fiance, and everyone's starting to wonder what is going on with them. I mean, are they even still together, or did she finally ditch him and his parents? Guys, you will never believe what is going on with these two these days. So, aside from a couple of quick updates from 90 Day Diaries, it's almost been 2 years since we last caught up with Brandon and Julia, and a lot of people did not think that they would stay married for long because of their many differences, but where they stand now is just crazy. So believe it or not, Brandon and Julia are still married, and when we last saw them, they'd been preparing to move to Ocala, Florida, and even had jobs lined up, but none of that went according to plan, and what happened instead was truly just unreal. So before starting his new life in Florida with Julia, Brandon quit his job in Virginia as a pest control technician, but at the last minute, his boss offered him a huge promotion, and Brandon didn't want to turn it down, but it meant relocating somewhere very unexpected. So last summer, Brandon and Julia moved to Virginia Beach, and they were less than a 2-hour drive from Brandon's parents, Ron and Betty, so there were plenty of opportunities for them to visit the family farm, but what they actually did was basically the total opposite. So Brandon and Julia spent a lot of their free time last year just traveling, and on one of their vacations, the couple went to Orlando to check out Universal Studios, but their next trip was much further away. So Brandon and Julia went on a tropical cruise that made several different stops, and they were able to visit the Dominican Republic and the Bahamas and Honduras and St. Thomas and more, but they went on another exciting vacation last year, and it just looked incredible. So to celebrate Brandon's 30th birthday in September, the couple took a trip to Dubai, and based on their Instagram posts throughout the visit, it seemed like they had an amazing time, but a lot of their followers were extremely confused because there were so many comments asking how the couple was able to afford all their vacations, and Julia explained that they've been more careful with their finances, which meant that they had extra money to use for traveling, but that wasn't all that she revealed, because Julia claimed that Brandon's new position as a supervisor brought in a larger income than his old job, but she was making money too now, and not just from her social media promotions. But Julia actually opened her own business last year, and you will never guess what it is. So surprisingly, Julia has been working as a dog trainer since late last summer, and she admitted that her time helping out on the farm was what sparked her interest, but how she managed to start a career from that was just kind of shocking. So Julia explained that Ron actually taught her a lot about training because he's also a professional dog trainer. And he and Betty own a kennel where they breed German Shepherds, which is where Brandon and Julia got their dog Simba, and they also added another German Shepherd puppy, Nala, to their family last year, and the couple also hit a major milestone last fall that benefited the entire family, and this was just a huge step for them. But in early November, Julia posted on Instagram that she and Brandon had bought their first house, and she added that they were so excited to be homeowners, but Brandon and Julia were also dealing with a ton of stress, which was getting so overwhelming because Julia revealed that there was a lot of remodeling projects in the new house, which they were doing by themselves. And she shared a few videos just to show how much work was involved, but there was also another situation that was making Julia just flat out worried. So Julia hinted at some immigration issues over the summer, but apparently her visa then expired in December, and that in itself is pretty crazy. And even though she and Brandon have been married for nearly 3 years, there's still so much uncertainty surrounding her current immigration status. And it turns out that Julia is at risk of being deported if she stays in the US any longer than 180 days after the date her visa expired. And in December, she and Brandon sent in all the paperwork that was needed, but still her status is just as nerve-wracking as ever, because in February, Julia took to her Instagram stories to announce that her immigration hearing had been finally scheduled, but the court date wasn't until the end of April. So if the judge didn't make a decision about Julia's immigration status, her time is almost up. And recently, Julia's future in America actually became even more mysterious because just a couple of weeks ago, she posted videos to her Instagram stories of her completely breaking down in tears, and this was just sad to see. And shockingly, Julia's car was broken into, and unfortunately, all of her money and cards and important documents and even her passport was stolen. So now her immigration hearing will most likely be even more troubling. And Julia said that she filed for replacements of everything she was able to, but she still felt so stressed and unsafe. And when she called her bank to cancel her money card, she made a really just frustrating and annoying discovery because apparently the thief had already managed to use some of Julia's money to buy gas for their vehicle as well as some McDonald's. And after the phone call with her bank, Julia experienced something else just kind of disturbing. About a week after the theft, Julia shared a startling video to her Instagram stories, and the footage was from her house's security camera that was taken hours after her car was broken into, and the caption was on the video revealed just how bizarre the situation really was. And allegedly, Julia saw her neighbor holding a handbag that had been stolen from her car, but when she walked over to ask, for it back, the neighbor just totally lost her mind, and Julia claimed that her neighbor started screaming at her and even threatened her. And thankfully, Julia called the police to help handle the scary incident, but so far, the only update hasn't exactly been positive because supposedly the neighbor has been writing intimidating notes and leaving them in Brandon and Julia's mailbox. But according to one of Julia's newest Instagram stories, she already has a plan for the future because Julie revealed that she and Brandon are going to finish making major repairs and renovations to their house, but after that, they're going to put the house up for sale. And Julia predicted that next year, she and Brandon will buy a house in a much safer neighborhood, and she even joked that maybe Brandon's parents will move in and share the house with them. And speaking of Ron and Betty, they've also been making some pretty unbelievable changes. So when they appeared on 90 Day Diaries, Ron and Betty were majorly downsizing their farm. They ended up selling all of their sheep and all but 2 of their goats, and selling the livestock was mostly Ron's idea, but he actually wanted to make an even bigger change because Ron wanted to sell the entire farm since he and Betty also own another home in Virginia, and the farm's upkeep was just getting way too much for him, and especially when he was going through his intense, sickness battle. So in February of 2022, Ron opened up about his medical treatments on Brandon's Instagram, and he admitted that he had a mass surgically removed from his colon. But that wasn't all, because Ron also went through 30 days of chemo and radiation to make sure that the cancer had been, wasn't able to spread or anything. And you're never going to believe what his most recent CT scan revealed. So thankfully, Ron has been completely free of cancer for just over a year, but that hasn't changed his mind about wanting to downsize and eventually sell the farm, because when he brought it up to Betty, she had a surprising response. So Betty was not ready to sell the whole farm, but she said that it would be a good goal for the future, and she and Ron talked about buying an RV and traveling around the country. But for now, it looks like Ron and Betty have been staying pretty busy in a super unexpected way, so it appears that they have been spending a lot of time hanging out with Brandon and Julia, and it's crazy how close they all are and how well they all seem to get along, especially Betty and Julia. And more often than not, the 4 of them film funny videos of each other and share them on social media, but honestly, most of them are of Julia and Betty doing something ridiculously hilarious together. And unfortunately, there haven't been any hints about a possible return to 90 Day Fiance from Brandon or Julia, but maybe that'll change once the immigration stuff is over. But anyways, what do you guys think about all this stuff? And what do you think about Julia's expired visa situation and her upcoming court hearing? And what are your thoughts on the couple's biggest updates, like their new house and Julia's dog training career? Guys, let me know in the comments down below.